Ever picture a digital forensics whiz, someone who can, take apart a computer system blindfolded, yet their reports leave you just scratching your head like you're reading a different language?
Oh, yeah. It's a surprisingly common scenario.
And it really spotlights something absolutely crucial in digital investigations that, well, often gets sidelined: clear, effective report writing.
Absolutely. You can be uncovering the most vital digital clues, maybe piecing together really complex events, but if you can't communicate those findings in a way that makes sense to others, well, the impact of your work is just significantly diminished.
And that's precisely what we're zeroing in on today. We're taking a deep dive into the chapter on report writing from Learn Computer Forensics, Second.
Hmm.
Think of this as your fast track to understanding how to document and convey your digital evidence findings with real precision and clarity. Whether you're involved in a case or maybe just curious about the whole process, this is essential knowledge.
Yeah, our goal for this deep dive is basically to extract the fundamental principles of sound note-taking and report writing in digital forensics. Make these skills understandable and actionable for you.
Okay, let's get right to it then. Starting with something foundational: effective note-taking. Our source material makes a point that really hits home.
What's that?
If you do not write it down, it did not happen. It sounds stark, maybe, but it's incredibly true in this field.
It really is. I mean, in the dynamic and often lengthy process of a digital investigation, where details can emerge over time just relying on memory, it's simply not a reliable strategy.
Not at all.
Your notes become the verifiable record, the proof of your actions and observations. Think of your notes as, like, your alibi. They need to stand up to scrutiny and tell a complete, verifiable story of everything you did.
Right. The chapter breaks down the core of good note-taking into a few key areas: documenting when an action occurred.
The date and time,
What action was taken?
like collecting RAM data,
What was observed?
condition of the evidence, maybe?
Exactly, and importantly, why that action was necessary.
Yeah, each of these elements provides critical context. For example, noting the exact date and time you got notified about an incident and arrived at the location that establishes a crucial timeline right away.
And detailing what you did, like you mentioned collecting volatile data, and maybe we should clarify, volatile data is the stuff that could be lost when a device is powered down, like what's in RAM, right? Random access memory.
Precisely. And collecting that is vital, especially because the process itself can, inherently alter the state of the evidence.
Okay, and that brings us to the why. You have to articulate why you made those choices. So in the case of RAM.
Well, it's to preserve data that would otherwise just vanish,
Right.
or consider a server environment. You often can't just power it off, can you?
No way.
You might need to do what's called a logical image, just capturing specific files rather than the entire drive. Your notes then need to explain why a full disk image wasn't feasible. Maybe the server's huge, or it just had to stay operational.
Makes sense. And these notes, they serve a purpose beyond just your immediate investigation, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. If a case goes to court, these notes, along with the digital evidence itself, can be examined by opposing counsel.
And they will try to understand and potentially challenge your whole examination process.
Exactly. So thorough and clear notes are really your best defense in validating your methodology.
So how much detail are we talking about here? The chapter suggests it can be, well, somewhat personal to each examiner.
Yeah, there's some leeway.
But the underlying principle is this: if you needed to recall the specifics years later in court, would your notes actually effectively jog your memory?
That's the key question. While there isn't like a single universal standard for note-taking, the chapter does outline some essential categories of information you should consistently document.
Okay, like what?
Things like specifics about the subject of the investigation, the people or organizations affected, and the precise physical spot where the digital evidence was found.
And when you're documenting the digital evidence itself, be granular, right? Note the make, model, serial number.
Any unique identifying marks, yeah.
And even the condition of the evidence when you collected it, including any physical damage.
Definitely. Documenting the condition upon seizure can be vital if there are later claims of damage happening while it was in your possession. You need that baseline.
Good point. What else?
Don't overlook the details of your forensic toolkit. The chapter really stresses recording the firmware and serial numbers of your hardware.
Firmware being like the operating system for the hardware itself.
Kind of, yeah. And the version numbers of your software, too. This provides transparency and allows for potential verification or replication of your process later on. Serial numbers uniquely identify each piece of gear.
Got it. And lastly, your notes should objectively record all findings, even stuff that doesn't fit your theory.
Yes, whether they support or contradict your initial theories. It's about maintaining a completely unbiased record of your examination. The chapter also touches on preferred methods.
Like handwritten notes first, then digital?
That's one suggestion, yeah. Initial handwritten notes at a scene, followed by digital transfer for organization. And using digital photos to document the state of evidence is also highlighted as really useful.
So the core principle here is organization and consistency.
Exactly. Regardless of the method, a clear and consistent approach throughout the entire investigation is paramount. And this detailed note-taking, as the chapter emphasizes, it's the essential groundwork. It's what lets you create a valuable and defensible report.
Okay, so you've diligently taken your notes. Awesome. Now comes the task of transforming all that raw information into a well-structured report.
The next big step.
The chapter emphasizes that the primary goal of this report is to document the findings of your forensic examination for, well, various purposes, right? Further investigation, legal proceedings, administrative actions.
And it's crucial to recognize that this report often serves as the foundation for any subsequent testimony you might give. If you get called to testify, you'll likely be questioned in detail about its contents.
Which really underscores the critical importance of clarity and accuracy. No room for sloppiness.
None at all.
So, one of the initial and crucial steps in report writing, according to the chapter, is identifying your intended audience.
Right. Who are you writing this for?
Are you writing for a technically savvy team, like maybe an IT security department? Or is it for a non-technical audience, lawyers, judges, maybe a jury? The level of technical detail needs to be tailored.
And that presents a real balancing act, doesn't it? A technical audience might appreciate deep dives into every digital artifact.
Yeah, they want all the bits and bytes.
But a non-technical reader could easily get completely overwhelmed by that kind of detail. The chapter suggests it's often beneficial to create a report that kind of caters to both.
How so?
Maybe with a high-level summary for the non-technical reader, and then more detailed technical appendices or exhibits for those who need them.
Okay, that makes sense. And to provide structure, the chapter outlines a general report template. What does that usually include?
Typically, sections for administrative information, an executive summary, the main narrative of your examination, exhibits containing technical details, and maybe a glossary of terms.
Let's start with the administrative information section then. What goes in there?
Okay, this basically sets the context for your entire investigation. It includes essential details like the name of your agency, any relevant case numbers, and the individuals involved, investigators, victims, suspects.
Right.
And if other agencies were involved before you jumped in, their administrative details and a brief history of what they did leading up to your work should also be included, just to get the full picture.
This section also covers the timeline of your involvement, right? Start date, significant prior events like interviews or warrants.
Exactly. The legal basis for your examination, your search authority, the specific scope of your investigation, and who authorized your work. And importantly, the chapter advises including copies of things like search warrants and supporting affidavits as exhibits in that technical detail section.
Gotcha. Next up is the executive summary. What's its purpose?
Its purpose is simply to provide a concise overview of the entire report. The chapter recommends it should be roughly, say, 10% of the total length.
Go.
Presented in short, clear paragraphs, and it should follow the same chronological order as the main narrative. Crucially, the executive summary doesn't introduce any new information not found elsewhere in the report.
So no surprises in the summary.
Nope. And it must include your key findings and conclusions.
So the goal of the executive summary is really to allow someone without a technical background to understand the essential steps you took and your main conclusions without needing to wade through all the complex technical stuff.
Precisely. The chapter offers a practical example. Like if you found illegal images in a user's pictures folder on a computer, you could just state in the summary that your examination revealed a specific number of images depicting illegal activities within that folder. It conveys the key finding in a way most people can easily grasp.
Okay, straightforward. Following the executive summary is the core of your report, the narrative section.
Right, the main body.
The chapter emphasizes that clarity should be your absolute paramount concern here. You want to avoid confusing or overwhelming the reader with technical jargon.
Yeah, this often requires defining technical terms and explaining concepts in plain language, especially if your report's going to be reviewed by people outside the digital forensics field, like attorneys or judges.
So if you mention a hash value, for instance,
you might briefly explain that it's like a unique digital fingerprint used to verify the integrity of a file. something like that.
And the level of detail in the narrative, it needs to be sufficient so someone can understand the investigation even if you're not around later to answer questions.
Exactly. The chapter even suggests including enough detail so that another qualified examiner, maybe even one representing the opposing side in a legal case, could understand and potentially replicate your actions.
Wow, okay. So the report really becomes the official, organized record of your agency's investigation.
It does. And the narrative must also be unbiased. Your role is to present the facts as you observe them in the digital evidence. No personal opinions, no assumptions, no emotional language.
Right. The chapter touches on identifying the user behind an account. You can't just assume the account name matches the person.
Correct. That identification should be based on a correlation of digital evidence, not just an assumption. You need proof linking the person to the account activity.
Okay. Now, the narrative section itself is usually broken down into subsections, right? First up is evidence analyzed.
Yep. Here you provide a comprehensive list of every single piece of digital evidence you examined. Include the make, model, serial numbers, where you can get them.
And for computer systems, the chapter highlights listing individual storage devices, like hard drives, separately.
Yes, very important, each with its own unique identifier. They give an example where a laptop might be tag 1, and the first hard drive inside is tag 1 HD001, and maybe an external drive is tag 1 TD0001, something like that. Clear separation.
Makes sense. The next subsection is acquisition details. This is where you describe how you actually created the forensic image.
That's right. This is where you detail the how of creating that bit-by-bit copy we talked about earlier. You need to specify the exact hardware and software tools you used.
Including those serial and version numbers again.
Absolutely. And the date they were last verified is working correctly. The narrative should outline the imaging process step by step, noting anything expected or unexpected that happened.
Like if the hash verification failed initially.
Exactly. If the process of verifying that digital fingerprint, the hash value, failed at first, you need to document that, and also document any troubleshooting steps you took to fix it. Identifying and documenting any issues during acquisition is critical for transparency and, frankly, credibility.
Okay. Then we get to the analysis details section. This sounds like the real meat of it.
It often is the most substantial part, yeah. And the chapter emphasizes that analysis goes way beyond just printing out a list of relevant files.
Right, it's not just a file dump.
Not at all.
Yeah.
You need to analyze the digital artifacts you've uncovered and clearly explain their relevance to the investigation. Screenshots of artifacts can be valuable exhibits, sure, but they don't replace the crucial need for a clear written explanation of what the screenshot shows and why it's significant to the case.
How should you organize this section, chronologically?
The chapter suggests various ways. Chronologically based on timestamps is one, where the specific device being examined is another, or even by individual suspects if multiple people are involved.
What's usually best?
A common and often effective approach is sort of a combination. First, establish ownership or usage patterns for a device, and then detail the specific artifacts related to the incident, perhaps in chronological order.
And keep the heavy technical jargon out of the main narrative.
Generally, yes. Those very detailed technical specs like byte offsets are better placed in the exhibits section.
So, for example, if a timestamp is key evidence.
In the narrative, you might just state that the user accessed a particular application on date at time. Simple. Then, in the exhibits, you could provide the more technical details, like the specific byte offset of that timestamp within the file system's metadata. You know, the data about the file.
Got it. The chapter also warns against using absolute statements or biased language here, right?
Definitely. Your role is to objectively present the facts as revealed by the digital evidence. Leave the interpretation and conclusions about guilt or innocence to the judge or jury, the fact finder.
So instead of describing web searches as, say, disturbing,
just state the search terms that were actually used. Stick to the facts.
Okay, and finally, the narrative section wraps up with conclusions finding.
Right. This is where you present your professional opinion, but strictly based on the digital evidence you have analyzed regarding the subject's culpability or involvement. The chapter advises keeping this section concise, direct, and free of bias. Focus only on conclusions directly supported by the digital artifacts you've examined and documented.
No speculation.
No speculation.
All right. Following the narrative is the exhibit's technical details section. This is where all those screenshots and tool reports go.
Exactly. This is where you include the actual pieces of evidence you've referred to in the narrative, screenshots of relevant digital artifacts, output reports from your forensic software tools, things like that.
And the chapter emphasizes a crucial one-to-one relationship here.
Yes, very important. Every artifact you mention and discuss in the narrative must be included as an exhibit, and conversely, every exhibit must be referenced somewhere within the narrative.
Keeps everything tied together.
Precisely. And organizing the exhibits in the same order they appear in the narrative can really help with the report's readability and logical flow.
Makes sense. The chapter gives an example like including system information, computer name, registered owner as an exhibit.
Right. And the corresponding narrative entry would just be a concise, factual, unbiased statement indicating where that information was found on the system and what it reveals.
This section should also include that detailed table listing all the software and hardware used, with version numbers and firmware.
Yes, absolutely. That level of detail ensures transparency and allows for the possibility of others to independently review or even replicate your work if needed.
And the chapter strongly advises against using unlicensed or pirated software.
Oh, definitely. That can severely damage your credibility and call the validity of your entire findings into question. Just don't do it. Use licensed, validated tools.
Good advice. Okay, the chapter then highlights something absolutely essential: proofreading.
You cannot skip this step.
It stresses that your first draft is, well, almost certainly going to have errors, right?
Always. Grammar, spelling, maybe even content errors or inconsistencies. So having a second objective person thoroughly proof the report is highly recommended.
For clarity and logical flow, too.
Yes, exactly. A fresh pair of eyes can often spot mistakes and inconsistencies that you, as the original author, might have just completely overlooked after staring at it for hours.
You get too close to it.
You do. And the chapter even suggests reviewing the report from the perspective of opposing counsel. Try to poke holes in it yourself to proactively identify any potential weaknesses or ambiguities.
That's smart. Proactive defense. Many organizations probably have internal peer review processes for this, too.
Yes, that's becoming standard practice, and it's a very good thing.
Finally, the chapter discusses report format and dissemination. What's the preferred format?
The preferred format mentioned is usually a digitally signed PDF document
Why digitally signed?
because it helps authenticate the report. It provides a way to verify if any alterations have been made after it was finalized. Adds a layer of integrity.
Are there other options?
Sure. Other acceptable formats might include things like HTML reports stored on optical disks, or maybe using the built-in reporting functions of specific forensic software tools.
But regardless of the format.
The key is to ensure you can reliably authenticate the contents of the report if you're required to testify about it. Digital signatures for PDFs or cryptographic hash values for reports stored on physical media like CDs or DVDs, those are mentioned as effective ways to achieve that authentication.
Okay, so to quickly recap this really vital chapter, the central message seems to be the fundamental importance of meticulous note-taking. That's the bedrock, right?
Absolutely. It's the foundation for producing a clear, concise, and defensible digital forensic report.
And we've covered the essential components of that report: admin details, executive summary, the narrative with all its parts, the exhibits.
Always emphasizing the need to communicate effectively with both technical and non-technical audiences. That's key.
Right. So with this understanding, you, the listener, now possess a solid foundation in how to take effective, comprehensive notes during an investigation.
And how to structure and write a valuable, impactful report documenting your findings.
Absolutely. Report writing is it's a comprehensive and critical skill. It's absolutely vital for ensuring the integrity and understanding of digital investigations. It's really the process that transforms complex technical findings into understandable information and actionable evidence.
And the chapter we delved into today provides the essential groundwork for, well, the next phase in the process, which, as this book outlines, is the crucial skill of testifying as a witness.
Ah, okay. That does sound like a valuable topic for a future deep dive.
Could be interesting.
Definitely something to consider. But for now, here's something to think about. How does this emphasis on clear, well-supported communication that we've explored in forensic report writing, how does that apply to understanding and explaining complex information in really any field?
That's a great point.
And maybe even think about the value of documenting your own digital breadcrumbs, so to speak, in your personal or professional life, just for greater clarity and accountability. Definitely something to mull over.